Well, hello there. We are here live once again, and this is volume two of why Gennadievich Golovkin is overrated. I've been waiting for this moment for all my life. Hold on, all right? Hold on. Um, in the past, we've had a previous conversation in reference to Gennady Gennadyevich Golovkin and how he is basically viewed as overrated when it comes to his reign in the middleweight division. There have been multiple instances where people make claims that he had been avoided or ducked over the course of his professional career. Um, and in the first video, we pretty much shown that it was not the case that these fighters had ducked Gennady Gennadyevich Golovkin. There have been instances where guys have been trying to put themselves in the position to fight Gennady Golovkin, and Gennady Golovkin and his team would not have those fights taking place. In the first video, we went over the resume of Gennady Golovkin when he started to win world titles, and then what happened after he won those world titles. So wanted to see here if I could share this thing here real quick before we try to invite more people on. So what I'm going to do here is I am going to share the screen with another tab that shows the resume of Gennady Gennadyevich Golovkin. And what I am going to show here on the screen is pretty much the time before he won his first world title. We've pretty much gone through this before. Um, where we kind of um, go through the start of his professional career, and that this is the time when he is winning his first world titles. Right now, um, when he won these titles, and I'm going to point out that he first fought Milton Nunez for the interim WBA world middleweight title. Milton Nunez was a guy that was coming up. Okay. He was coming up from 154 pounds. And it didn't even take within 1 minute. Let me go through that again. It did not even go through 1 minute in that particular fight where Gennady Golovkin knocked out Milton Nunez. Okay. Now, Milton Nunez had basically been at super welterweight, right? Now, Milton Nunez had a draw against Segundo Herrera. He had a fight against Johnny De Horta, who was 0-2, a fight against Ignacio Solar, who was 19-15-1, a fight against Jose Cervantes, who was 7-1, Edison Teheran, who was 6 wins, 6 losses, and 1 draw, a fight with Diego Castillo at 23-6, another fight with Johnny De Horta, who was 0-3, a fight against Howard Cassiani, who was 0-4, and then before he fought Gennady Golovkin, he fought a guy in Anibal Miranda who was 8 wins, 16 losses, and 1 draw for the WBA Federball Super Welterweight title. When he fought Gennady Golovkin, that was going to be his first fight. That is a 12-round fight. His fight against Gennady Golovkin was his first matchup as a 12-round fight. Okay. So within 1 minute of the first round, Gennady Golovkin takes out Milton Nunez. His next fight is against Nelson Julio Tapia. Now, Tapia is a guy that, he did fight Milton Nunez, and he beat Milton Nunez for the super welterweight title back in 2008. Now, he had a little bit of a better resume at super welterweight, including a fight against Austin Trout, which he lost, and a fight against George Sebastian Hedlund. That was actually at middleweight, and it was for the Fidelity middleweight title that was vacant in the WBA. But still, it was going to be his first 12-round fight against Gennady Golovkin. Now, with that being the Federated middleweight title, or the Latin middleweight title, right? That to me does not constitute him being the top contender for fighting for the WBA middleweight championship, right? So I don't see where that comes in, right? So with that being said, he becomes the WBA middleweight title champion. So Gennady Golovkin becomes the WBA middleweight champion. Like I said here, you have this fight against Kasim Uma, where Uma had lost to multiple guys at super welterweight. He he did have fight against Jermaine Taylor back in 2006 for the WBC and WBO middleweight title, but still he fought and lost to Saul Roman, to K9, Cornelius Bundridge, to Gabe Rosado at 154, and also to James Martirosyan at 154. Then he went back up to 160 to fight Joey Gilbert for a vacant NABA middleweight title before he fought Gennady Golovkin. And then he loses to Gennady Golovkin within 10 rounds. So, that type of thing there, man, that's kind of like the whole little background that we have when it comes to Gennady Golovkin and his resume and how it is overrated. We've gone through, these particular fights that are shown here, like the Makoto Fuchigami, the Gregor Sposka, Gabe Rosado, Nobuhiro Ushida, Matthew Macklin, Curtis Stevens, Adama Osamanu, Daniel Gill, and Marco Antonio Rubio. But what I want to do here in this particular video is show how Gennady Golovkin basically is overrated and why he kind of sidesteps a couple of fights. He sidestepped them. Okay? So here's the thing. So here's what I'm going to basically focus on. I'm going to focus on this particular period right here that's shown. Okay. Now, in 2014, October 18th, 2014, he fights and defeats Marco Antonio Rubio within 2 rounds. He is coming in as the WBA and the IBO middleweight champion, and he faces Marco Antonio Rubio for the interim WBC middleweight championship, right? Marco Antonio Rubio had been bouncing up and down between middleweight and super middleweight when when he fought Gennady Golovkin. Okay, in 2012, at the end of 2012, he fought Michelle Rosales, excuse me, for the WBF Super Middleweight Championship. He defeated Carlos Baldomir for that WBF Super Middleweight Championship in September of 2012. Okay, so he was bouncing around between middleweight and super middleweight at that particular time. Actually, at the beginning of 2012, he lost to Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. for the WBC middleweight title. Okay, now when we get up to the point where he faces Gennady Golovkin, he was at super middleweight, then he goes down to middleweight, and he faces Domenico Spada for the interim WBC middleweight championship, and he wins by KO. 6 months later, he fights Gennady Golovkin for that interim WBC middleweight championship. Right now, there, exactly, man. Um, exactly what I'm talking about. So the thing here with Marco Antonio Rubio, no, I'm not talking about the Marco Rubio that's a politician in Florida. That's not who I'm talking about. I'm talking about Marco Rubio, who had an extended career in boxing. That's who I'm talking about. Now, Marco Rubio was there at 59-6-1 and gets knocked out in 2 rounds by Gennady Golovkin. Now, if you see there, if you're able to see on the screen, actually not quite yet. Let me take this link off. Right now, I said and I stated that Marco Antonio Rubio was bouncing up and down between super middleweight and middleweight. Right. He won the interim WBC middleweight championship. Before his fight against Gennady Golovkin, he weighed in at 161 and 3/4 pounds. Okay. 161 and 3/4 pounds. So he came in there overweight for this particular bout against Gennadyevich Golovkin. Okay. So he wasn't going to be even qualified to win any type of belt. He would have been stripped of his interim WBC championship at that particular time, and he would have not been able to fight for the other belts that Gennady Golovkin had. Okay, so he's basically disqualified for competing for those world titles, right? But either way, he gets knocked out in 2 rounds, and Gennady Golovkin gets the interim WBC championship. First of all, he shouldn't have been fighting for the interim title in the first place. Being a world champion or a quote unquote unified world champion, having an IBO championship alongside the WBA championship. But even so, he wins that interim WBC championship to become the mandatory for the WBC middleweight championship at the time. Now, around that same time, you had Miguel Cotto there, who had already won the WBC middleweight championship against Sergio Martinez. And with him winning that belt against Sergio Martinez, that was not a mandatory, defense by Sergio Martinez, right? So with Cotto winning it, either he could have had a rematch against Sergio or had a voluntary defense, right? Of course, we all know Sergio had his leg issues and everything like that, so he was basically fighting on one leg. So no, there wasn't going to be a rematch. So that gave Miguel Cotto the open opportunity to have a voluntary defense before fighting a mandatory. Now, he fights Daniel Gill 12 months after he wins the title against Sergio Martinez. Gennady Golovkin won that interim belt in October of 2014. So he had up to October 2015 in order to make that mandatory defense. Now, after Cotto has that voluntary defense against Daniel Gill, he makes another defense against Canelo Alvarez, El Campeon, right? Now, with El Campeon, Canelo Alvarez, that was going to be another voluntary defense, and the WBC had called the mandatory at that particular time. So Miguel Cotto had the obligation to pay a step aside fee there for that particular bout between him and Canelo Alvarez, right? So he goes on ahead and he pays, right? He pays the step aside fee. But the sanctioning fee was going to be $300,000. Miguel Cotto offered to pay $125,000 for the fee to keep the belt, but the WBC declined, you know, and they refused to negotiate the fee in this case when they basically have done it for multiple fights or multiple major fights. So that is why before the fight between Cotto and Canelo, that Cotto relinquished the belt or forfeited the belt and it became vacant, was because he didn't want to pay $300,000 and the WBC wouldn't budge. Now Canelo went on ahead and accepted the fee, so that once Canelo won that fight, he was able to keep the belt. So you had Canelo winning the WBC championship. Now, going into what Golovkin has here, right? He has the WBA, the IBO, and the interim WBC middleweight championship. And he fights Martin Murray 4 months after he fights Marco Antonio Rubio, right? Then 3 months after that, he fights Willie Monroe Jr. Okay. Now, at that particular point, there was another guy that he could have fought and would have had a unification, and he ended up not doing it. So I'm going to go into more of this a little bit later, right? Now, he fights David Lemieux, who's a good boy. Dominic Wade, who's another good boy. Um, Dominic Wade was a replacement for Toriano Johnson. Toriano Johnson was the original IBF mandatory, but got injured, and then he had to step out. So I wanted to see if I could get in another person in here that's checking in to go over the resume of Gennady Gennadyevich Golovkin. Mr. Matthew Brown, how are you doing? Not able to hear you. I'm not sure if the mic thing is working well on your side. Yeah, I'm not. Yeah, I'm not hearing you. Might have to check out and then check back in. Cause like even if I mute your mic or whatever, then still not able to hear you through audio. So we'll probably see if you could try to link one more time. Not sure if you have a Android or iPhone. But either way, I mean, it's worked before. You've been on before, so it's worked before. Not sure why it's not working right now. Going back into this thing with Golovkin's resume at this particular point, he fights David Lemieux in Madison Square Garden. That is David Lemieux's first defense of the IBF title, and it's 4 months after he wins that title. All right, that should be good. You should be good, Matt.
Can you hear me now?
Uh, yeah, I do. Yeah.
All right. Yeah, I'm live from quarantine in the Gloom Tomb, Bronx, New York. Coronavirus, like Cardi B said. I told you that shit is real. Um, but it's good that we can find time in these uncertain times to not expose ourselves to the coronavirus, but expose the boxing world to the fraud that is Gennady Golovkin.
One thing I have said, I've told somebody by the name of MP to step up or stand down, and he hasn't stepped up yet.
Well,
That's
I'm familiar with that guy. I'm familiar with him. He's not going to step up. He'll never step up because he can't elocute himself in a manner that deserves to be broadcast live on this illustrious YouTube channel. So to hell with MP. Okay, if he wants to defend his boy, Mr. Golovkin, he has an open invitation on your show. Anywhere he wanted to do it, but we know he doesn't have the cojones, the chutzpah, to actually do it.
or to quote the words of a certain guy by the name of Mick Foley, the testicular fortitude. Um, well, it is what it is. Now, I was going into the thing there with David Lemieux, right? Now,
Yeah,
David Lemieux was the IBF middleweight champion. And in
correct.
the last video that I did in reference to Gennady Golovkin's resume, I pointed out that David Lemieux had won the IBF title over Hassan and Dom. It was basically a vacant IBF title because
Yeah,
Jermaine Taylor had the belt for defeating um, Sam Solomon.
yeah,
And so Jermaine Taylor, after Jermaine Taylor went crazy, that's when the IBF championship, became vacant once again.
yeah,
So David Lemieux had won that belt by decision over Hassan and Dom, and Gennady Golovkin had a choice at that particular time to fight and unify the middleweight titles. And there was a champion by the name of Andy Lee, and then you had David Lemieux. Andy Lee had fought to a draw against Peter Quillen and
yeah,
still had the WBO title. So Golovkin had his choice: fight Andy Lee or fight David Lemieux. Apparently, David Lemieux was a good boy.
exactly.
And so he fights David Lemieux within 4 months after David Lemieux wins the title. So there's that. Now, the next fight, Dominic Wade. Like I said, replacement opponent for Toriano Johnson. Toriano Johnson was originally the IBF mandatory. Okay. So at that particular point, Gennady Golovkin still had his choice. He has now the IBF and the WBA middleweight championships. He is the interim WBC champion, and which was, done in a crooked way. And the WBC catered to his demands. Okay. Um, so he tried to force their hand, right? What's interesting is that in January of that year, there was another guy that was interested in fighting Gennady Golovkin. He was the newly crowned WBO champion, Billy Joe Saunders, right? Now, I'm going to get this off of uh, Gennady Golovkin's resume a little bit, and I want to see if I could go into um, a article from ESPN that was dated back in January 6, 2016. Billy
Yeah,
Joe Saunders has told world middleweight number one the Gennady Golovkin that he needs to make him a better offer or agree to fight him in England. The WBA and IBF champion Golovkin's team last week made Saunders an offer believed to be 2.2 million pounds sterling or £1 million sterling, which is equivalent to
Yeah,
about 2.7 million US dollars, right?
not bad.
So it's not bad, but still, it's not really that good enough when it comes to a unification bout that could be either in New York or in the UK at the time. But
Yeah,
with with Canelo and Cotto having their fight, where Cotto basically had $15 million. He won 50. He had $15 million purse,
yeah,
and Canelo Alvarez made at least 5 million for that purse.
yep.
So people knew what Gennady Golovkin's aim was when he was trying to fight for the interim WBC championship.
It's the money.
It's
That's
the
all.
money. It's basically the money. And people that claim that Cotto and Canelo duck Golovkin
Stupid.
is completely foolish. First of all,
Stupid. It's just
when
stupid.
it comes to Canelo, he ended up fighting Golovkin anyway, twice. That's number one. But number two is this. Here's the thing about the interim WBC championship, right? They keep claiming that because Gennady Golovkin won the interim WBC championship, that he should have had an immediate shot against the likes of Miguel Cotto or Canelo
Absolutely not.
Alvarez. And it's absolutely not.
Absolutely not.
And the reason why is this. You have a Sebastian Zibic that back in 2009 defeated Domenico Spada for the interim WBC middleweight championship. And he had multiple occasions where he could have fought for the WBC title and it didn't happen. At the time, you had Kelly Pavlik as the WBC champion. And there was
Hmm.
one instance where Kelly Pavlik fought in one fight and Sebastian Zibic fought in another fight on the same day. It actually happened in two separate occasions.
I
It
remember that.
it happened in the De La Rosa occasion, and then when he fought Sebastian Zibic fought Domenico Spada, that's when Kelly Pavlik fought Sergio Martinez and lost to Sergio Martinez. And then soon after that, the WBC elevated Sergio Martinez to super champion, and Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. was able to win the WBC middleweight champion. Well, not the super champion. He was the diamond champion. They
Yeah.
made Sergio Martinez the diamond champion, and then Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. was able to be the WBC champion. So it took him 2 years after winning the interim WBC middleweight championship to fight for that WBC world title. Now,
Yep.
if you're going to claim that Miguel Cotto or Canelo Alvarez was ducking Golovkin at that time, then you have to say that Kelly Pavlik or Sergio Martinez was ducking Sebastian Zibic at that time.
Well, here's the difference. Here's the difference. Sebastian Zivic didn't have the HBO marketing team behind him. That's all it is. It was all just marketing, just clever marketing by
Hmm.
HBO. After they lost Floyd, they were looking to
Hmm.
build new stars. You had Luis Ortiz, Sergey Kovalev, and you had Gennady Golovkin. Those were the guys that they tried to build as stars. And the funny thing about
Hmm.
it is all of these guys were built as boogeymen of their
Yep.
respective divisions. You know, it's
Yep.
all HBO marketing. That's all it was.
Okay. Now, here's the thing here with Gennady Golovkin, right? Now, I did say that in January there was that offer for Billy Joe Saunders, and that was an offer that was too low, right? Now he does fight Dominic Wade, and he has that IBF mandatory defense, right?
Yeah.
So after that, he is able to finagle his way to try to force Canelo Alvarez into a purse bid so that he could get a much better split
45
and
percent
45%. And Canelo Alvarez is like, screw you. You don't deserve 45% of nothing. You ain't really done nothing much ever at middleweight. You don't like, what the heck is your biggest win at middleweight?
And Canelo was 100% right.
You know, so he said, you know what? If y'all are going to cater to Gennady Golovkin in this case, screw you. You could have the belt. Peace out. Right? So Gennady Golovkin has a WBA title. He has the IBF title. He now has the WBC title.
Yep.
Okay. So there's one more title for him that he could get for him to have, quote unquote, all the belts. Right.
Yep.
And there was Billy Joe Saunders there with the WBO title.
Yep.
There wasn't any other offer that was sent Billy Joe Saunders' way. What does Gennady Golovkin do? Gennadyovich Golovkin do? Who does he fight in his first defense of the WBC middleweight championship? Let's go ahead and see. Mr. Kell Brook.
Wow.
Kell freaking Brook. You mean to tell me that you could have had the perfect opportunity right then and there to try to become the undisputed middleweight champion of the world, and you went on ahead and fought Kell Brook? Now
Just
I
out of
can't.
curiosity,
Uh huh.
do you remember who he tried to fight before Kell Brook?
Somebody by the name of Chris Eubank Jr.
What belt he had?
Oh man, there was somebody on here that basically got off. I'm not sure if he had some IBO title or anything like that, but what I do know is that this is the same Chris Eubank Jr. that lost to Billy Joe Saunders. That's what I know.
Yep.
So why would you try to send offers out to a Chris Eubank Jr. and then end up having a fight with Kell Brook, who you earlier claimed was too small, but not try to fight for the undisputed middleweight championship of the world?
You know what's funny? Didn't Kell Brook make about 5 million to fight Golovkin?
Yeah, he made about 5 million or so to fight Golovkin. Um, yeah, he did. Yeah, I was trying to
Let me ask you a
find.
stupid question. So Golovkin offered Billy Joe about 2 million and change, and didn't want to fight in the
Mm-hmm.
UK.
2.7.
But
Right. Initially. Yep.
they got 5 million for welterweight Kell Brook, and they fought in the UK. Why?
That's
Why?
right.
Why is that? Why not have
Uh,
undisputed in the UK? I'm pretty sure if you would have gave Billy Joe Saunders $5 million, he would have took the fight, and it was going to
Yep.
be in the UK. He
Yep.
would have took the fight. So why didn't Golovkin make that move? And why does history remember it as Billy Joe Saunders somehow not wanting to fight.
And here's the other thing too that could actually try to nix anyone that tries to say, oh, but the fight wouldn't have been as big in the UK. Well, if it's not going to be as big in the UK, then put it in the US. Put it in Madison Square Garden. If you were able to sell out Madison Square Garden for a fight against David Lemieux, you could certainly sell out Madison Square Garden for
Yeah.
the undisputed middleweight championship fight. But you still didn't want to do it. So you were able to pay Kell Brook $5 million at minimum to fight over in the O2 Arena in the UK, but you couldn't fight Billy Joe Saunders for the undisputed middleweight championship of the world at that particular time.
So I guess it's not about all of the belts, then, is it?
Nope, not really about all the belts, not in that instance. And following this particular fight, you had the whole thing with him and Daniel Jacobs. Now, here's the other thing where MP tries to say something stupid about the thing between Golovkin and Jacobs.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. Jacobs was trying to get more money out the deal, being the WBA regular champion at the time. And they didn't want to pay him that money.
Yeah.
They didn't want to pay him that money. Now, if I'm not mistaken, right, this particular event was it was on pay-per-view. Yeah, it was on pay-per-view. Um but they didn't want to make it a pay-per-view fight. That was the problem. They didn't want to pay Daniel Jacobs that much money, because if they did, they would have
Yeah.
had to have made it a pay-per-view fight. You know? So that was the thing there. And at that particular time, they pretty much sealed the deal as far as like Gennady Golovkin fighting Canelo Alvarez at that particular time. Like the
Yeah.
first fight was pretty much sealed in stone before this fight took place. So the performance of Daniel Jacobs, I don't care what anybody says, I had Jacobs being able to execute more than what people thought he did. And I felt that he won that fight. I felt that he won that fight. Other than rounds
But
4 and rounds
Golovkin
5
got the
that were clear
decision.
Golovkin rounds, Golovkin got the decision because we all know what happened.
Golovkin, it is what it is. We got to abide by the judge's decision. But here's my thing.
Hmm.
After Daniel Jacobs, he
Hmm.
agreed to fight Billy Joe Saunders for the undisputed middleweight championship in June at the Kazakhstan
Hmm.
Expo. But yet,
Hmm.
that fight never took place. Why is that?
People are going to claim that Oscar De La Hoya said that he was going to block the fight between Golovkin and Canelo if he fight. No, that wasn't. He never said that.
Yeah.
So Gennady Golovkin could have fought Billy Joe Saunders at that particular time, but nope. He was like, this was the fight that he wanted to have. He wanted to have that money fight against Canelo Alvarez. And if he ended up fighting Saunders and lost to Saunders, then all of that stuff would have came crashing down, like how Lennox Lewis lost to Oliver McCall in that fight between him and Riddick Bowe, where he would have fought for $17 million. That all came crashing down. So
Yeah, but here's the thing. If Golovkin's supposed to be this killer and his stated goal, because this was the marketing scheme, order the belts. I want order the belts. If that was the goal, then why not fight Saunders for all of the belts?
all the
Why are you
belts.
chasing Canelo in the first place?
Right. And the thing about it is like, you know, it's the same. It was the same instance when he tried to force a fight between him and Miguel Cotto. It was all for the money, you know, all for the money.
And you know what? I don't mind that. I don't mind if you're just fighting for this is boxing. You know, they get punched in the face for a living. It's
All
crime
right.
fighting. They deserve to get paid as much as they want to get paid. But
Hey, hold on. That
yeah,
like the sound like kind of got muffled.
you know what you saying?
Yeah, the sound is like muffled now. I don't know what happened. Hold on, not hearing you right now. It's like the phone, like you
Can't hear
moved the
you.
phone or something.
Yeah, I can't hear you anymore.
Yeah, I don't know what
I hear
happened
you, but
in this case.
I think it's your Wi-Fi, bro.
Nah, well, nah, man. I better put in a complaint or something. But nah, I just had a live where everybody was all good to go, man. They were all good to go. Just had a live.
Wow.
Yeah.
But if his stated goal is all of the belts, you can't go around and then try to cash out. It's either you want all of the belts or you want to fight for the money. But be upfront with the people and be honest about it. You know, I respect Floyd Mayweather. Floyd Mayweather said, "Hey, listen, I don't fight for you. I want to make the most money possible. It's about making these nice business decisions that's going to make me the most money possible." I respect that. What I don't respect is, oh, it's all the belts, all of the belts, all of the belts. But then you have a chance to fight for all of the belts, and you eschew that in favor of going to fight Canelo in September. And then to top it off, you try to lie about it. You know, you say you're injured, and that's why you have to pull out the Saunders fight. But then when Frank Warren and Billy Joe Saunders pull you out of the bullshit, then it becomes, oh no, it's just general soreness. And then it's, oh no, we want to wait for Canelo. So that's what you should
Oh,
have said in the first place.
oh man, I
Say you
wish.
want to fight for all of the best, want to cash
Yeah,
out.
yeah, I wish Jamil was here. I didn't even look for this. He told me that there was audio that Billy Joe Saunders had where they basically told him that hey, they were going to go ahead and go through with the fight, and then all of a sudden, oh, Gennady Golovkin has an injury, and he pulled out of the fight.
Yeah,
And I'm like, come on, man. All right, so you had that first Canelo fight. It's a draw, and then we all know that whatever happened with Canelo, right? So
yeah,
Gennady Golovkin says, you know what? I want to still have a fight on this day on Cinco de Mayo, right? And they set it up to happen in
yeah.
California, right? Do they fight the WBO champion? No, they don't. You know, um, he was, still, there around there as a, middleweight champion or whatnot. So, do they fight the middleweight champion at the time? No. Um, do does he fight his IBF mandatory that was called in Sergey Derevianchenko? No. He goes and he looks for a good boy by the name of Veins Martirosyan. He said, "Oh, Veins Martirosyan? Oh man, he hasn't had a fight in over 2 years. He was at 154. Oh, he good boy. We fight him. He good boy." So because
Pulls
of
him off
that,
of the scrap heap.
yep.
No interim fight division that he hasn't fought at. Just ridiculous, ridiculous, unacceptable,
And
if you ask me.
yeah, it is unacceptable. And I don't see why like anybody that is a fan or a supporter of Gennady Gennadyevich Golovkin can actually try to explain why he fights Veins Martirosyan. Don't tell me about the whole thing about Canelo Alvarez. There were multiple fighters that were out there that Gennady Golovkin could have fought. He could have fought Demetrius Andrade, and he didn't do that. He could have fought, um, Sergey Derevianchenko to defend that IBF mandatory, and he didn't want to do
Yeah,
that. They would have possibly had him fighting Jaime Munguia, but that wasn't allowed. So it's funny that they wouldn't have that whole thing with Jaime Munguia go through, with Munguia coming up from 154, but you have somebody that was inactive for 2 years that lost to Erislandy Lara in his last fight, and you say, "Oh, he good boy. We gonna fight him. Is he a good boy?" Right? Come on, man. Come on, man.
but you
That's
gotta remember who Vanis Martirosyan promoter was, Don King. I'm pretty sure Don King had some back dealings with the Nevada State Athletic Commission back in his day. You can lean on a favor to get some guy approved that's coming off
you're in
a
California,
2 year
yeah.
layoff.
Yep. So he probably, talked with a few guys in California, and he, went on ahead and spoke with Tom Loeffler and said, "Hey, I mean, we got this guy available. I mean, he could fight Golovkin." And I'm like, "Come on, man, that was just bad." You had the whole thing with Cecilia Braekhus against Cali Reyes in that undercard. That was, at least that was a good fight. But this right here, man, it's
Yeah.
just, you know, it's just a bad look. Just a bad look. Just going to hear a little bit more on this thing here. So of course you have the second fight between Gennady Golovkin and El Campeon. So Canelo Alvarez, and Canelo wins the fight. He talking about, uh Canelo isn't fighting Mexican style. He didn't fight Mexican style in the first fight. It's like, okay. So what did Canelo do? He stood there in the pocket, stood there in close quarters, and fought Gennady Golovkin in close quarters and beat him pretty much to the punch in every single occasion.
Yep.
And he got the decision win over Gennady Golovkin. Now, after that particular point, Gennady Golovkin has his first loss. He has no belts. He's not, Mr. 154 to 168. So there's pretty much not much out there other than a couple of fights that he could have. Now, at the end of the year, by the end of that year, he could have fought somebody that was highly ranked in the middleweight division. Matt, do you know who that person is?
Tell me.
He is somebody by the name of Jamal Charlo.
Lions only, baby.
So he could have fought Jamal Charlo for the interim WBC title, and he would have had an immediate shot at Canelo Alvarez at that particular time if he
Yeah,
wanted
because
to
that's the
force it.
narrative. Once you get the
Because,
WBC title,
yeah,
Golovkin fans say you're entitled to an immediate
you're
shot.
entitled to
So
immediate
why
shot,
not go
right?
for it?
So why not go for it?
Yeah, you went for
But
it when Marco Antonio Rubio was the
you had
guy.
no
Why not go?
problems.
Charlo's the guy.
Yep. Had no problems when it was Marco Antonio Rubio, the senator or the politician from Florida. But when it's Jamal Charlo, you have
Exactly.
issues about it. You have issues. So but even at that particular time, because of Gennady Golovkin's, you know, complaints and whining and complaining and all of that before the second fight, because remember, that second fight was pretty close to not happening because Gennady Golovkin
Yep.
was crying about getting this amount of money and that amount of money, and Canelo was like, "What? No, you don't. You don't deserve any of this. You're not really entitled to this. You still haven't done anything. You didn't beat me, and you haven't really fought anybody. So you telling me that you're going to get this amount of money because you beat Veins Martirosian? Come on, ain't no way. But they were able to get that deal done. Canelo went in there and fought Golovkin Mexican style and beat him and got all those belts. And so Golovkin didn't have no belts. So now Golovkin has no belts. He has no route or anything like that. El Campeon gets to deal with the zone, right? So I know you're kind of like a staunch critic of the zone at times. The zone got played in that particular deal with Canelo Alvarez. Okay,
Did they
because
get played?
uh, I feel that they did in a sense
But played by
because
who? Oscar?
well, yeah, because basically it was Oscar that made that deal. Canelo Alvarez didn't really have any parts of it. It's not like Canelo and Oscar were in good terms even back then. You know, so and I think that's also part of the whole thing that went back and forth between Canelo and Golovkin before the second fight. Because I think
Oh
that
yeah,
Oscar was trying to force that whole thing because he knew how big the fight was going to be, but he was trying to push Canelo to accept the deal that or the counter offer that Gennady Golovkin was sending out, where Golovkin was asking for too much money, and he's like, no, he's like,
yeah,
nah, this it's not gonna happen. So back to Golovkin, you had Canelo that gets to his own deal, and eventually, Golovkin had his choice. He could have went over to you know PBC and had fights at the middleweight division in PBC and would have fought Jamal Charlo. He said no, and here's another deal where I feel that the zone really that's where like all of that money that they were spending, like this particular one, nah, man, like it's not cool. Like you give Gennady Golovkin a deal where not only he gets money off of the fights that he gets, but he also gets a percent share of the zone. Nah, like nah, you don't really do that. So he's on the zone, and the first guy that he fights is Steve Dinner. Oh, sorry, my bad. Steve
now let me
Rose.
ask you a question
Man, I
about
can't
that
do
fight.
this.
Let me ask you a question about that fight.
Okay.
Why is it Gennady Golovkin um, showed no interest in moving up in weight his entire career, but the one time he does move up in weight is to fight Steve Rolls?
Well, there was that one instance where he could have fought Little Chavez at 164, but that was a catch weight, basically, right? And he would not fight, definitely would not fight Andre Ward at 168. So the first fight that he has above 160 pounds is against a guy that had been fighting in 4 round, 6 round, and 8 round fights for a majority of his career. Only had one fight that was 10 rounds against Keandre Leatherwood before fighting Gennady
Yeah,
Golovkin in a 12 round fight. So that to me does not make any sense at all that he, goes ahead and does that to fight Steve Rose as his first fight in the zone, first fight with Jonathan Banks as his trainer. Okay. So he goes ahead and he has that fight, but then he goes back down to 160 pounds and he finally faces Sergey Derevianchenko for the vacant IBF and IBO middleweight titles. We know the whole story about Canelo Alvarez and his when Oscar De La Hoya and the matchmaker there for Golden Boy Promotions. That's the only reason why they are able to fight for the IBF title, was because they
Yeah,
basically
they lifted
screwed
that.
up.
They basically they stole Canelo's belt.
Yeah, they stole his belt. They basically hustled him in that instance. So that's where he's able to fight Sergey Derevianchenko. And other than the first round, Derevianchenko beat that dude. I watched that
Of
fight.
course.
What was it? A few days ago. Derevianchenko was like going in and out of the pocket, moving to what is it? He was like moving to his left, pretty much almost like seamlessly,
At
like
will.
making Golovkin reset multiple times. And there was something like either it was the fourth or the fifth round where Derevianchenko got Golovkin in the body, and Golovkin was backing up real serious. And then all of
Yeah,
a
the referee
sudden,
held him up.
God, man, that mother, man, that freaking Harvey Doc stepped in talking about they were too close or break or something like that when they had good amount of space between each other. If he would have been able to follow up, that would have at least been a knockdown for Sergey Derevianchenko. And there was no way that Gennady Golovkin won that fight. So,
Yeah.
so that's Gennady Golovkin's resume. And bear in mind that after this particular fight, they were planning to set up a fight between Golovkin and who was going to be the IBF mandatory at that particular time. Okay. And that was going to be Camille Cesare-Meta, who had just basically fought on the undercard of Golovkin versus Derevianchenko. To the point where um who was it that Cesare Meta fought in this thing? Um Oscar Cortez. That's who Cesare Meta fought in the undercard of this particular matchup, is Oscar
Yep.
Cortez. And so when Camille Cesare Meta was going to be the IBF mandatory, and that was an 8-round fight, by the way. He was going to be like, oh, Cesare Meta, oh, he's a good boy. He's a real good boy. I could fight him. He's a good boy. Um, but when it comes to these other fighters that are out there, you know, that are in the middleweight division, like a Demetrius Andrade, who has held the WBO title, you don't have any interest in fighting him for the WBO title, and yet you're about to fight Canelo once again September 12th at the AT&T Stadium, but you wouldn't have signed to fight Demetrius Andrade for the WBO title.
Nope. And I think the Canelo fight is gonna be at 168. I
Yeah,
don't see Canelo going to
yeah,
160.
yeah. There's no way. There's no way that he's going down to 160. He's already went up to that that 175 that 175 limit, basically, where he fought Sergey Kovalev. He was 174 and a half pounds. So there's he's not gonna go back down to 160 pounds. This thing's going to be around 168. So that is going to be Golovkin's second fight
Yeah.
above 160 pounds. So you fight Steve Rolls above 160, and now you're going to fight Canelo Alvarez above 160. You
Yep.
mean to tell me that you couldn't fight Ward? You couldn't fight Carl Froch at 168? Couldn't do that? And you were willing to fight Little
Andre
Chavez
Ward.
164. You know, So that's why I'm like the like fans of Gennady Golovkin just like I'm like, how do you say that he's as good as y'all think that he is, but he never wanted to basically fight for the undisputed middleweight championship. He never fought for the WBO middleweight championship at any point
Yep.
of his career. No point.
Hey.
I said I said beforehand, initially when he fought Milton Nunez and Nelson Tapia for the interim WBA belt, that was the same time that Daniel Jacobs and he had Jacobs fighting for the vacant WBO title at the time against um yeah, Prerog, right?
Yeah.
So why isn't it that you couldn't fight Prog within those 2 years and had to wait at least 2 years to try to make that particular fight before Prog had his back injury? Both of them were under HBO, if I'm not mistaken. Or at
Yep.
least that fight between Prog and Jacobs was on HBO. But the next fight that Prog had, they sent him over, to freaking what was it like Germany or whatever it is to have his defenses of that WBO
Yeah.
title, but you couldn't
To
have a
me,
unification bout.
Golovkin's career is basically about the fights he didn't have. That's what his career has come down to, basically. And I think you illustrated that perfectly. There are certain moves that he could have made, that he should have made, that would warrant all the fanfare. But he didn't make them for whatever reason. We can say maybe he didn't want that smoke. We could say maybe his people didn't want those fights for him. We could say maybe HBO wanted to protect him. They didn't want him to lose. We can say whatever, but what we do know is that there are fights that Golovkin should have had, could have had, that he didn't have. And it's a shame because this guy had almost 400 amateur fights, but yet
Supposedly,
was still moved along slowly.
right? In
Doesn't make any
comparison
sense to me,
to,
but it is
in,
what it is. Man. You said,
yeah, it's funny that people want to talk about Vasyl Lomachenko in his decorated amateur career and what he was able to do. What is basically a rarity, but still he was still able to step up in competition very early in his professional career. But when it comes to Gennady
yep,
Golovkin, he had multiple instances even after his whole little promotional thing before he got with K2. After he got with K2, he had those multiple opportunities where he could have fought for the WBO middleweight championship, whether it was against Peter Quillen or against um, you know, um, Billy Joe Saunders, or if it was against Andy Lee, or if it was against Demetrius Andrade. He still didn't want to fight for it. And for him to
just was
have
never
that
interested.
chance, never interested, and for HBO and all of these other fans that say, "Oh, this guy is supposedly a killer in the middleweight division," yet he never fought for the WBO middleweight championship, and that perfect opportunity where he could have fought for the undisputed middleweight championship of the world, he goes ahead and he fights Kell Brook. That right there
Yep,
should basically end all discussion. You had a chance to become the undisputed middleweight champion of the world, and instead you would have fought either Chris Eubank Jr., who lost to Billy Joe Saunders, or Kell Brook, who you claimed earlier was too small for you. So that's basically what I got for all of this, man. I mean, I'm kind of like done with this. I don't. I still. You're still gonna have those Gennady Golovkin fans that are gonna be delusional. Like I said, that other guy was too much of a coward to step up to get on this live and debate. So that is what it is in this instance. Um, we're going to have like a little bit more things on here. In my last live, where I was talking about Lennox Lewis, because I got on Lennox Lewis
Yeah,
um, in his resume, because someone else said that the guys that he fought, like Evander Holyfield and Mike Tyson, he fought them when Holyfield and Tyson were at the tail end of their careers. He didn't fight them when they were at the top of their game, like in the early '90s or whatever it was.
yeah,
So, so that's where like Lennox Lewis's resume is overrated, and here Gennady Golovkin's resume is overrated. So there's that. We had another suggestion that we may do later on with Terrence Crawford. Someone wanted to go over Terrence Crawford's resume. So that's going to be an interesting one. Terrence Crawford's resume,
yeah.
because a lot of people, put him amongst the top three pound for pound. But other than the time where he, defeated Victor Postol and Julius Ndongo to become the undisputed super lightweight champion, the rest of that resume, I don't know. So we're going to go over that resume in detail
Yep.
a little bit later on down the line. Might be tomorrow or sometime later this week. So we might do it tomorrow or Saturday. But thanks a lot here, Matthew Brown, for coming on. Um,
Well,
Sunday
I'm looking
on
forward
the
to it, man. I'll be tuned in.
Sunday on the Boxing Source Radio Show podcast, we are planning to have Raquel Pretty Beast Miller on. Um,
Ooh,
but
can that be a
yeah,
video
yeah, man.
podcast?
I was trying to. Yo,
Mm,
nah, I couldn't do it,
mm.
man. Yo, hey, man, I ducked the video podcast. I ducked it. I'm sorry
Hey,
if this is
I
on
got
wax.
my
I don't
baby
care.
oil already.
I don't
I got a
care. I
nice
don't
big
care if
bottle of
this is
baby
on
oil
wax.
ready for that podcast. Tell them to make the
I
video.
ducked. I ducked the video podcast, but I'm not sure, Matt, if you want to be on there for that long because someone else will be on with
Oh
me.
God. Uh,
So that's going to be a little bit compromising and uncomfortable. Oh, but I think you do want to be on there because he plans to talk about your girl. So I'm sure that you would want to go on and defend your girl. So that's going to be the plan for Sunday, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time, live. So be sure to be on the lookout online to when I post the things there.
yep.
Someone got in here, fairly late. Want to see if they could come in here a little bit. What's going on, man?
Not much. What's going on, guys? It's Mike Grady. How y'all doing?
Good, man. We done went through Gennady Golovkin's resume,
Hey,
man. We're about to.
hey, hey! I don't give a shit about Gennady Golovkin. The only reason why I got on is because I heard Matt tell me some shit like that when you said the girl was coming on. That's the only reason why I got on. I was listening to it on YouTube because I was trying to do some work. Matt and this bitch singing.
Hey, we gonna have Matt Brown doing some ballads on Sunday for Raquel Miller.
I didn't hear the rest of what you said, man. You got to repeat it for me if you said something else funny because I was trying to get on. So I know it's not as original as you said it the first time, but if you didn't say anything, that's fine too.
Oh man, I don't know if this audio is all the way in.
I was about to say, we see you, right?
Yeah, you know.
we can see you.
I mean, he's there in the gloom tomb, but yeah,
Yeah.
I think his like audio is like in and out, man. But yeah, we're gonna have
Yeah.
Raquel on. Um, it's going to be
All
interesting.
right, Jay, I gotta run.
All right, my dude.
All right then.
All right, thanks for having me.
Yep. Um. So yeah, we're going to have Raquel Miller on Sunday. So going to solidify all of that, and that's going to be a fairly interesting discussion. So I'm kind of like looking forward to that.
What's she
Um,
gonna talk about?
she's going to talk about her like she was going to be planning to fight for a world title real soon because she was basically the interim I think it's interim WBA champion. So she was planning to fight for the WBA Super Welterweight Championship at that particular time. So they were supposed to lock down, a fight between her and I think it's Hannah Gabriel's for that WBA Super Welterweight Championship. But we're also going to talk about her and her amateur background and that type of thing, and also her dealings with Clarissa Shields. So that's kind of like what we're going to cover for most of the podcast on Sunday.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right.
So hopefully, either Friday or Saturday, I might go through Terrence Crawford's resume. So if I do that and have that scheduled, I'll let you know, Mike, so that we can go through it.
No problem.
All right. So that ends this particular live video going through Gennady Golovkin's resume. Whether you're a fan of Gennady Golovkin or not a fan of Gennady Golovkin, you could comment on the video. Um, of course, you're gonna have the Golovkin defenders be all over this, try to be all over this, but hey, the facts are the facts are contained within this video. So if you dispute the facts, then that's pretty much on you. So that is what it is. On that note, folks, I am out. Peace.